we were going to school in Valley City, North Dakota. Your dad was. And we were about 40 miles from his dad's farm. And they gave me a little plot of land to raise a garden if I wanted to. And I was very happy about it. So I planted, and then we came home on weekends and took care of it, weeded it. And I raised enough off of that little tiny plot to provide all the neighbors with their garden stuff. And they were amazed because they never, gardening was not one of their things. So when we moved to Minnesota, we moved into a little place about 20 acres. Part of it was pasture, and so I raised a garden, but I didn't have the tools to work with. All I had was a pitchfork to dig up the soil and a hoe. But I planted a garden and it did well, and then some friends of mine were out from town one day, and I was out messing with my garden, and they were amazed that my string beans seemed to be ready. Well, so I said, sure, you can pick some if you want to. They picked some, but then they insisted on paying me for them. And I didn't want to pay. It was just something that grew. Well, and then I thought, maybe I could charge. So I put an ad in the paper that said vegetables for sale. Pretty soon people started coming. And then I started raising more vegetables and cucumbers. They all wanted cucumbers, but they wanted enough to make a lot of dill pickles, and they had to be little. So I picked cucumbers, a lot of them. Then I found the big chore with cucumbers is washing them. And then I found out that you could wash them in the washing machine. And it only took a few minutes to finish a whole bushel of cucumbers. And that was a boom. Because mostly before the whole family had a brush and a big tub of water and spend half the night washing cucumbers. So I raised cucumbers and I raised potatoes. Potatoes was a big demand for potatoes, new potatoes, and tomatoes, beans, anything I raised I could sell. But there was not much money in it because they didn't want to pay anything for them. But they paid a little and it was okay. And sweet corn. Because I did raise very good sweet corn and I knew when to pick it. And so it was very good. And then price-wise, I remember selling it for three dozen for $1. And I didn't get rich, naturally. But it was something. I didn't have to go to work every morning. I went to work here, but I didn't have to get up and go and find babysitters for my kids. I could be home and I could make a little. Wasn't much, but a little money. I did that. Then I was raised in the mountains, and the smell of pine trees I just loved it. And of course, there's no mountains in Minnesota, less in North Dakota. So I decided I didn't decide. I asked my family if we should raise some trees. And because it was so sandy here, and when the wind blew, it was terrible. And I thought the trees will stop the wind and the snow, and maybe when they grow up a little bit, we can sell them for Christmas trees. So everyone agreed that'd be fine. And you could get them through the county office some way if you took so many. So I took a whole bunch, and they came, the plants came, the trees came. They were just really tiny, but they were wrapped in wet burlap, and you were to keep the roots wet. And the county had a tree planter. It took 2 people to set and put the plants in the ground or into the planter, and then it would cover them up and pack the dirt around them. So they came, and I called the planter, and he came, but they needed 2 people to sit on the planter. So I called my good neighbor, Carl Jensen, asked him if he would help me. Yeah, he would help me. He always wanted to see what planting trees was about anyway. And so he came over, and I guess they were called seedlings. Anyway, they were so tiny, and it was a cold, rainy day, but we worked all day with that, and we had most of them in the ground. Well, maybe, I think I ordered 4,000, which was a terrible amount to order. Mostly pine, well, they were all pine trees. They were all pine and spruce. And Carl said, they'll never grow, those little tiny things will never grow. And we were putting them about 10 feet apart. But that night, it was so cold. We were so cold and tired because we'd been working all day. But I still had maybe a couple hundred left to plant. And I couldn't get the planter the next day, so I decided we could put them in ourselves. So that's what I did. Took me a little longer, but we planted them. And the next spring, we had a pretty good crop. They hadn't grown much, but the pine trees had grown a little bit. The spruce, they were just like when I planted them. But in about 2 years, the pine trees had really grown. And the spruce trees were just beginning to start growing. They had developed a really good root system, so they grew fast. So in about 6 years, we advertised for Christmas trees. And so we sold Christmas trees. People come and mark the tree they wanted when it was nice weather, and then when they wanted to put it up for Christmas, they would come and saw it down. So that was kind of my life. I raised vegetables in the summer and trees in the winter. And trees, then my neighbor Carl, he decided to plant some trees, so we have some pretty good shelter belts around our place, which we needed. Now they have all grown up and they're tall, and probably some of them are falling down, but it was an adventure, and we didn't make a lot of money, but it was a help.
Animals? Animals?
Oh yeah, we did have animals. When we first moved here, I don't know why, because I hated chickens so bad. But we had a barn, a pretty good sized barn. We brought, I think, 6 Holsteins with us, and they had the loafing part of the barn. But since we had so much space, we ordered chickens. I don't know why we ordered chickens, because I didn't like chickens. They didn't like me either. And and eggs were 8 cents a dozen. So mostly we worked to feed the chickens. That's about all. But the cows, milk cows. But Dad had to work for the Green Giant. Teachers didn't get paid much in those days, so you had to supplement. And so quite often I had to milk the cows. And Peter was just a little 2-year-old, and I made a pen in the barn for him to stay while I milked the cows, because I didn't want them to step on him. And then my daughter, she liked pigs. So she raised pigs. The chickens, I was so happy to get rid of them. I don't know how we got rid of them. I used to leave the door open hoping someone would steal them, but they didn't. And I was happy to see the chickens go. And then the pigs came, and Pat took care of them. She loved pigs. She took care of all of the pigs. Except usually when the day litter was to be born, everyone went to school. So I had to go and take care of the pigs. Get them on, and it was in the winter, and I had to get them, it was cold, very cold. Had to get them under a heat lamp and so on. But she loved pigs. She took them to the fair, and she won a lot of prizes. Took them to the state fair, too. And then when she married, and when the kids, her little boy and girl, decided to get her a pet pig for Christmas. And so they bought her a pet pig, which she loved. In fact, the whole family loved her. They named her Roxy. And Dick, who wasn't raised on a farm, knew nothing about farm animals, he liked her. And she liked him. She could hear, when he drove into their driveway, she could hear, and she'd get so excited and always go to the door to meet him. And that could go. Just last year, Roxy, that was her name, She died on the way to an operating room. And it was a sad day for everyone. Because for 20 years, she had, and usually 12 years, I think, is the lifespan of pigs. But she for 20 years, she was there by the door waiting for them when they came home from work. So it's been a conglomeration of animals and vegetables and trees. And it's all been okay. It's not been easy, it's hard work, but it's satisfying. And all those trees that I planted that I didn't get to sell, they're still here and they offer a pretty good windbreak. Probably the best crop I ever raised.
You tried irrigation for a while.
Yeah, of course the big problem with raising vegetables is when you need water, you don't get it from the clouds. And so I realized that if I was going to do this, I had to be able to irrigate them. So we got a little irrigation system and irrigated, and that was a lot of work. But it helped, especially on dry years when nothing else grew. I could raise something. I could raise the vegetables, and but you had to move the pipes, and it was a lot of work, but it was worth it.
How long did you do that? How long did you do that? How many years did you do irrigation?
Maybe 6, 5 or 6. Someone wanted to buy the pipes. My pipes out here, or whatever they are. But I think it was such a wet spring that they didn't need them.
Why'd you stop? Why did you stop irrigating?
Everyone went to college.
Yeah, that'll do it.
And there was something you couldn't do alone. Well, you could do it, but it took 2 people to move the pipes. On our system, I'm sure now they have the sprinkling systems on the underground and all of that. It's much better. But I didn't have that.
So, what were your customers like for the vegetables?
Mostly they were nice. I met a lot of nice people, and I must have provided everyone within half of the state with cucumbers to pickle, because people come up to me now, "You are that pickle woman." They remember that they got things here. It's kind of nice.
So
It isn't a way to get rich. Maybe it would be now, I don't know. But I'm not going back and do it. But I didn't mind it. It was something I could do at home, and I could watch them. I could plant things and watch them grow, and I didn't have to, I could have gone back to teaching, but I didn't really like teaching that much. I thought it was hard work. And I couldn't, when I could have gotten a job teaching, I couldn't afford to. They paid so little teaching that, and what it would have cost me to teach, I would have had to buy a different car, another car. I would have had to get daycare setters. I would have had to buy different clothes. You can't teach in overalls. And I just couldn't afford to teach. So it was a way I could stay home and kind of keep things in order at home and make a little bit of money. And it was kind of nice because both Pete and Pat graduated from McAllister. And maybe I wouldn't have been able to send them to McAllister. Well, it helped that they were really smart and got some good scholarships, but it helped.
So did you learn anything about vegetables in all this time growing up?
Oh, yes. You learn from people. I had never, I didn't know anything about, I knew what you had to plant and that, but I didn't know any tricks or things that you really should know about, that I learned along the way. I had planted potatoes one year and they came up and they were all up nice and it was going to freeze that night. So I ran out and I worked for hours and I just covered them up with dirt. I just piled the dirt on top of them so that they wouldn't freeze them. And I thought, well, in the morning I'll go out and uncover them. Well, I didn't get around to doing that. But I found out they came right through that dirt. And the potatoes really have to be healed up because what grows, the potatoes that grow above the seeds. So the more you heal them, the better off they are. So now when they came up, I just go out and cover them, whether it's frost or not. Onions. I learned something from Dave Slattery, who was a priest, and he left the priesthood, and he was coming out of church one Sunday, and he said, I've got to go home and scratch the dirt from around my onions. And I thought, what are you going to do that for? They'll just sunburn. I had been healing them up so that they wouldn't sunburn, but I wasn't getting any onions either. And I went home and I thought, well, it's not working the way I'm doing it. I might just as well try it. Sounds dumb, but I'll try it. I scratched the dirt from around the onions, and my Lord, I had prize onions. They were very nice. So, you do learn a few things along the way. I didn't learn that in books or anything. It's just something, and you remember things that little lessons that you have been taught that you didn't realize were valuable. But in growing Christmas trees, my grandfather, who always went with us out west to get our Christmas tree, he insisted that we leave one branch on the bottom. We cut above at least one branch. And in fact, there was a little spruce tree, I guess, or a pine tree. It must have been a pine tree out in the pasture that he had got for his, that he had gone and got for his kids when they were little. And the snow was deep, so he couldn't cut it off down to the bottom. He had to cut it off where he could get in the snow. And the next year, that one branch just grew straight up in the air and grew into a beautiful new tree. And so he kept doing that. And he was telling us about it. And he always insisted that we leave a branch at the bottom of the tree, and it will grow into another tree. And it grew very fast because it had a good root system. So you just kind of learn things as you go along.
So how was it with neighbors?
My neighbors did some gardening. No, they didn't do it to sell mostly. Mostly they did it for just their own consumption. But there was value in gardening. You could can and supply yourself, your family, with food for the winter. I remember Pete saying, we were growing these so we'll have something to eat when winter comes. And that was kind of the way it was. Most of my canning, I think about it now because I don't can too much anymore, but would be done after supper at night because I'd be working out in the garden all day. But a lot of canning was done after you got through with your day's work. But you could can what you wanted.
You started out without much equipment.
No.
A hoe?
I pitchfork. I'm telling you, I actually, and this land had so much quack on it, which was a terrible terrible weed to get rid of because it grew underground and it grew from seed and it was awful. But what you had to do is dig it up and burn it. That's about the only way you could get rid of it. And I dug up, the first few years, I dug up most of the land with a pitchfork. Carried the roots off and burned them.
Well, I'm thinking about how the community garden got started in the first place. This is the North End Community Garden in North Minneapolis near Lowry Avenue on Penn. And I guess it goes back, I'm not even sure how many years. This is the 5th year we've had the garden, but I don't know how many years before then we as a family had thought, it'd be nice to be part of a community garden. I gotta admit that our motivation from the start was that this yard of ours at home was becoming shadier and shadier. We couldn't grow tomatoes, cucumbers, and bell peppers. So that's what I always tell people. I say, we got involved in this thing because we wanted to grow tomatoes, cucumbers, and bell peppers. We got 2 walnut trees shading our yard. They put juglone in the soil, and interfere with those vegetables. So we were kind of on a mission to find a sunny space to grow these things. And community gardens were sort of a new idea. I mean, they had been around for quite a while, but it was starting to increase. And when I look back now, the year our garden was first planted, 2010, our community garden, was the year that the whole community garden movement really took off here in the Twin Cities metro area. So it was September of '09, and my husband Steve was just in the hardware store where he had shopped for nearly 30 years, and just mentioned to the owner, who he knows well, "Hey, do you know any place where people could have a community garden around here?" And as Steve will say, he was aware that there's more and more empty lots in North Minneapolis. And this is even before the tornado, but there were just more and more lots that were just sitting there empty, and he thought we'd drive around and say, "There's a nice sunny spot for a garden." So anyway, he was in the hardware store, and the owner said, "Yeah, I just bought a piece of property down the block." And I was talking to the owner earlier this year, and he said, yeah, when he bought that, he thought, now I'm going to have to weed that and figure out how to keep that clear of weeds. What am I going to do about that? And so Steve walks in right around that time, and he says, yes, you can garden on that property. So we went over there to look at it, and it was full of chunks of concrete foundation and weeds and a ratty old chain link fence along one edge. We weren't even sure which of the two lots it was because there were two there. We ultimately found out which one it was. A little later in the season, in spring, the following spring, the owner of the other lot heard about this and offered for us to use that lot too. So that's why we ended up with a two city lot community garden. So this is fall, and we start cleaning it up, and he lets us use rototillers from the hardware store, and it's just there. There's metal things in the ground. There's pieces of foundation. It was really bad property. I guess there had been a business there, and it had burned, and so the lot had sat empty for a while. So in winter of that year, we started getting the word out. We put little articles in all the local papers. We put signs up, I think, maybe at the hardware store. We got the word out to the neighbors we know, the people we know in this area. And we just had come to a meeting. We had a meeting at a park building nearby, and we were just amazed at how many people showed up. And a lot of those people subsequently became part of the garden that year. So then, also that fall, as we were cleaning up the whole thing, my daughter Laura and I went to a workshop put on by Gardening Matters, specifically for people who are starting a new community garden, and that was really helpful. I really thought they do a very fine job of supporting the whole community garden movement around here. They gave us a lot of information. They gave us examples of like garden agreements to make up for your garden. It was fun to get together with other people that were starting community gardens and find out the reasons, because they were all different. So that's how it started. Then we had a work day. We got some free dirt from a farm. We ordered compost through Gardening Matters, and we got going. That first year we had all individual plots. Just nice rectangles all on a road on the property with a kind of a circular round part in the middle. That was the first year. Probably had about 30 individual plots. But then the next 4 years, this is our 5th year, we transformed a good half of the garden or more into communal plots and gave people the option of being involved one way or the other way or both. Most of the people still want their 17 by 5 piece of this good green earth to plant what they want. But a number of us put all our energy into kind of a communal effort where we'll plant companion things, and we'll share the work, we'll share the maintenance, and we'll share the results. The garden membership is diverse, and I like that about it. I end up meeting and talking to people that I normally wouldn't. I always say to people, now 3 things will get strangers talking to each other: dogs, babies, and gardens. And you're walking down the street, you pause, you got a baby in a carriage or you got a dog on a leash, people will stop and say something. When we're working in the garden, people will stop and talk to us. People say, hey, this is beautiful, or thanks for what you're doing here, or when are the cabbages going to be ready? There's sort of a misunderstanding that you can come and take whatever you want, which isn't necessarily true. So I guess I like to tell people we started the garden to grow tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. What we got out of what has happened to us instead, I think the biggest benefit is it's probably the biggest way that we're involved in North Minneapolis. We've lived here for 32 years. I feel like I really care about this part of town, and this is a way to get people, neighbors, to get to know each other, to get to not only beautify the north side, but to just help in a small way create a more humane environment, a friendlier environment, and just kind of show that North Minneapolis is a great place. It just bugs me when people will say to me, and I could go on a big trip if I had $1 for every time people say to me, oh, you live in North Minneapolis. I bet it's really changed over all the years. Oh, is it dangerous? It's kind of questions. I think that is the one image of this part of town that dominates, and I feel like this garden and people working with each other, talking with passersby, is a little step in a direction to kind of create a different image for North Minneapolis. I guess most of all, I just care about the people that are part of it. So that's how it all got started.
Well, first things first, did you get your tomatoes, cucumbers, and bell peppers out of this deal?
Somewhat. We have found that people take things because, as I said, they don't quite understand how a community garden works, and we're happy to share, but we don't like to be stripped clean. So I tell people to plant cherry tomatoes. People will take some, but they won't strip your plants clean. So yes, we do. We plant a lot of different kinds of tomatoes, but a lot of cherry tomatoes. Cucumbers, you can grow a lot of them, and so even if some get taken, you end up with some. And bell peppers, a few, not too many. They get taken, or I don't know, maybe they don't even grow that well there. What we get a lot of that are good, a lot of good herbs, a lot of good greens, beans, peas. We have flowers in the garden. And bottom line, I like going to the farmer's market too. And whatever we can't grow or gets taken, I just go buy it at the farmer's market. Or at the farm that our daughter works at. So the answer to your question is kind of, but that ceased to become the driving reason for the garden.
Some areas of North Minneapolis, there's worry about soil because stuff got buried there. Was that something you had to worry about on the lots you took over?
We tested for lead. One of the people that was involved early on was a horticulture student at the U, a friend of Laura's, friend of our daughter Laura. And so he got our soil tested, and it was fine. And we didn't test for everything else under the sun. I guess that's one of the major ones. We add a lot of compost to the soil, and figure that and the dirt from a farm that we got to start, which also, of course, brought in a bunch of farm weeds, but that's just kind of what you get. Figure those are those are a major part of what stuff is getting planted in. So I think the lead test assured us that it was an okay place. Now, I know it's on a busy street. Cars are going by with exhaust all the time, and I know that even cigarette smoke is not good for plants, and that's around in that environment. And it's a city garden. I think the trade-off to have good stuff growing in the city, makes it worth it. I wish we didn't have to even be concerned about those other things, but.
Now, how did the transition from everybody having his or her own little plot to the largely communal plots happen? And I can imagine a certain audience for this that just couldn't imagine how a garden could ever move to communal plots.
Well, first of all, we gave everybody the option to still have their plot. Some people were a little overwhelmed by the experience the first year. They couldn't keep it up, they couldn't keep it weeded, so they were happy to kind of get into a communal effort where it didn't all fall on them. Because you go there, you look, and the plot next to you is all neat and weeded and flourishing. And yours, you can't distinguish the weeds from the plants. And so some people found out it was too much for them. Most of the people still have an individual plot. Some of them do both. Some people that have enough energy do both. And so it was really an easy transition, just because the option was there for both. We've never had too many people wanting to do the communal plots and even take the stuff. I'll email the group, I'll say, the cherry tomatoes are all ripe, go pick some. Right now, dill is going crazy. Go get dill weed before it dries up and the heads form and the dill weed starts to dry. So I think we haven't had a problem where people can't get enough of what they want to grow or have help to grow. A big push behind the communal plot was our son John, who had done some reading and stuff, and he was very interested in kind of gardening called Hugelkultur. That's a German word, and it's a method where you bury in the ground sticks and branches and brush and even logs, and then you pile all kinds of dirt and compost and stuff on top of it. So you kind of have so it's a raised bed, and we made round ones, great big things. And the idea behind it is that the wood decomposes and puts good stuff into the soil as it does so. It also acts as a sponge, soaking in excess water and holding water through dry parts, so it balances the unevenness of rainwater. And so we built a bunch of those, and that was kind of fun. And we have some of those in the garden, and those, the first years, they're not as fertile as then they get. The soil in them seems to be getting better, and stuff is really flourishing in them. It takes some time to break down. So that was part of the move to the some communal plots. The other thing that happened this year is we have six of our plots are being taken care of by Hmong gardeners who are new to the garden this year. They're all connected with an agency, and the two women that work there are present too. They don't have a plot themselves, but they're supporting the other gardeners. Their plots are gorgeous, 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 and they developed the last remaining undeveloped part of the garden this year. And I'm just amazed at how hard they work, how excited they are about the garden, and how beautiful their plots are and what they're growing there. So that has been a wonderful addition to the garden. Another section of the garden we let a group called Project Sweetie Pie use, and that's adults supporting kids on the north side, using some of their time and energy in the summer to grow good stuff. And Michael Cheney is one of the, I think, the founder and one of the big energies behind it. Other people are very involved in it too. So there's a whole section of our garden that's Project Sweetie Pie, and they're growing stuff. I believe it's sold at one of the north side farmers markets. So that's kind of neat too, to have youth from North Minneapolis involved in that way.
So, how much time do you spend at the garden in a week?
Kind of depends on what else is going on in my life. This year, I have liked to spend Wednesday mornings there because our Hmong gardeners come during that time frame, and I like to be there around them. It's fun to be in their presence and watch them and interact a little bit. I don't speak Hmong. Some of them don't speak much English, so the other two translate for us. But you can communicate a lot without words too. So it's fun to be there with them. And then I'll go over, an evening here and there. So, 2-3 times a week I'm there. And the busier in the planting time of year, I'm there a lot more. But then, then it's kind of maintaining. We each have our areas of the communal plots that we're assigned to. One of the gardeners sort of nicely said, well, and we've lettered them all. You've got C and F and G to keep weed free this year, and everybody can help anywhere, but there's sort of in the communal ones, each of us have a few plots to keep our eye on. So then we go over there, we're cooking something and we need some dill or some basil, or there's mint and oregano growing crazy there. We've planted some herbs the first year that have just become well established, and flowers all across the front. So I like to go there as much as I can because it's so beautiful. I like to hang out there.
Do you think the garden has changed people's eating habits at all?
That's one of our hopes, to contribute in our small way to better eating in North Minneapolis and to a part of town that really doesn't have very good resources. There's a co-op, food co-op coming to North Minneapolis. We're already members, but it doesn't exist yet. There's a lot of people working on making it happen. But this is one other small way to say to people, fresh vegetables, fruits, herbs should be a major part of our diet. So, and we will give each other ideas. Like the other day, I was showing some of the gardeners who were there the borage plants, and I've known that borage was, you could eat the little blue flowers, but I didn't know until this year that the leaves were edible, and they make a really good savory broth in a soup. So I said, these plants that are going crazy here, they self-seed, and I said, those are edible. So that's just a small way that we help one another, give one another ideas of what you can do with stuff. People will say to me, well, how do you use such and such, some vegetable we're growing, and so we'll give each other ideas. How much that can spread to the north side at large, people large, I don't know. I guess I kind of have mixed feelings when people take stuff from the garden, because I think, well, if they're hungry and they need it and they're eating it, I'm good with that. I'd like them to talk to us and maybe become part of it, or at least ask, but
Well, on the scale of thieves, cabbage thieves are pretty low down.
And you know, cabbage. First of all, I read something recently. Cabbage takes a really nutrient-rich soil, and it takes a lot out of it. So it's kind of a little bit of a tough thing to grow that way. Whereas some things will just enrich the soil, are easy, but they're also kind of theft prone. So I don't think they're so much worth growing there.
So the theft prevention strategy is to shift the things that people don't steal.
Or that, you know, they can take some of, but not, you know, if you're watching your one cabbage plant grow all year and then you get there one night and it's gone, you know, plant a whole bunch of greens. Let them take some of them. Plant a lot of cherry tomatoes. Plant herbs, green beans, pole beans, bush beans, peas. Let them snack on them as they walk through.
So you got your Hmong gardeners who are there a lot. You're there quite a bit. Like, what's the mix of working investment in this community?
It's a very wide variety, from people that are real regular and that will take on little leadership positions to people that just kind of show up a few times and their pot maybe kind of looks like it. But people try to help each other too. And people who have young kids, you know, people will know, well, they've got a full plate. No wonder they're not over at the garden. They've got their hands full with several little kids or whatever the reasons or concerns. Or, you know, somebody ended up in the hospital for quite a bit of time this spring, and others were trying to clean up that person's plot. So people look out for each other a little bit. But so the amount of energy, time, and even know-how invested in the garden is pretty broad. And we sort of have everybody's welcome to be part of it attitude. We want to encourage people to get involved. Even if they don't know that much about gardening, we're all learning as we go all the time. So
how much, like, organization and leadership is necessary to make this thing work? Are there meetings?
yeah, that's a good question. We have a few. We had a spring potluck at one couple's house where, you know, first of all, we just enjoy good food and each other's company and get to know each other, and then we just talk about whatever issues people want to talk about. And out of those meetings, like last year, one guy agreed to build a storage box for us, you know, because people said, well, we need a place where we can leave our gardening tools and the hose and stuff like that. So ideas come up at those meetings that do get acted on. We'll usually have a wrap-up meeting in the fall too. Potluck, maybe a little bit of food from the garden. There's a community garden day, statewide community garden day every year that we participate in by kind of having an open house at our garden. We've sometimes had work days where, you know, or work times. Some years we've said Tuesday night in the garden, you know, come if you can. Well, some people can, some can't, but or Saturday mornings. It's just nice sometimes to declare a time. The communication happens mostly by email. One person doesn't have email, and so we email through a friend to him, so that everybody can be contacted in some way. So whenever there's, you know, concerns or questions somebody brings up, or stuff that's ripe and ready to harvest, and we want to say to people, come get this, and this. It's all abundant right now in the garden. We do it by email. We spread around the leadership a bit, and that is wonderful. Like, you know, one person's in charge of finances. I take care of the membership. Somebody else took care of the compost situation this year that we needed to order, and somebody has organized the community garden day involvement. So some people have done the building projects, some people have taken on watering duties, or maintaining the paths. We have wood chip paths through the garden. So people have taken on different leadership areas.
So how large is your membership?
You know, I had to put that on a garden survey recently, and I think I estimated about 42 people, including a few youth in the Project Sweetie Pie and everybody else that's involved. So, and that sounds like a lot of people. You don't see very many people there at any one time. You go over, lots of times there's nobody, but sometimes on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, it's kind of more a time when people drop in. You know, a bunch of people will show up. But I think all total, about 42. And about, I had to put this on this survey I was filling out. It's about half and half, male and female, which is nice too. And like I said, a variety of ethnic backgrounds, variety of ages, families, single people.
So it works with very limited organization, occasional emails,
Yeah.
and no fences.
No fence. And sometimes people have wanted to, we need to get a fence. And I think, nope, this is first of all, it's not our property. Second of all, we want an open attitude. And the neighborhood walks through the garden. There's a big wood chip path through the garden where neighbors walk through on their way to some of the local stores. And we want that to continue because it's their neighborhood. And we want that openness.
So I can imagine this is a thing that could exist just the way it is, no particular changes for 30 years. But are there new things that are occurring to people, or the directions that it's changing? Or does it just kind of stay the same?
In just our garden, or in community gardens in general? Are you thinking a little bigger?
Your garden. But if there are other things you want to mention, that's great too.
I know people who are involved in some other gardens, so I hear a little bit. And some gardens have bees, or they have planted an orchard with their garden. We have a few fruit trees, some cherry trees and a pear tree. So we're trying to develop a sort of a garden that will be ongoing, not something where you're starting with a bare ground every year. We looked into the beekeeping situation. It was a little too complex for us at this point. I guess I would love to see, if we have pieces of empty property around in our city, I would love to see lots more gardens where lots more people, while they're cooking supper, can just walk over to their garden, pick some green beans or something. That gardening in the city becomes more a norm instead of an exception. And it is becoming a lot more common. There's just an incredible number of gardens that have popped up in the last 5 years. So I'd just like to see more of that happening, I guess.
Thank you for your time.
All right.